Good. I welcome you to this actual refilming of the second part of my presentation for the sabbatical that I did for the church during the live piece of this in the parish hall where we're standing. An Amber Alert went off and it shut down the videoing, and so for the 6 of you who might want to watch this, hopefully it's more than 6, but anyway, I am re-recording it for you. Just to kind of give you an introduction, this was my theme for the sabbatical, Paso a Paso, Dios me forma, which means step by step, God is forming me, and that comes because of all the walking I would do on the Camino, but all the walking that I did in preparation for this. Today we're going to focus on the Camino and then the piece that I did for what's called the Soul Care Intensive. The first thing that I did want to do is the previous Sunday I had thanked all the leaders and people who kept this place going, and didn't really thank the staff. And I really want to say, like, Matthew had a lot on his shoulders. He did a phenomenal job getting everything, kind of keeping everybody running, herding the cats. And the staff itself, there are no cats. They're phenomenal. And they did a great job. And when I arrived here in August, they're ready to rock and roll for this fall. And so I'm just so pleased and thankful for them, and just want to for everybody to know that. All right, each and every day I would have different themes that I'd put together for the sabbatical. Some days I would repeat those themes, but they were just ways of walking for 5 or 6 hours and actually having something to focus on, as opposed to just letting my mind wander throughout the day. One of the things that became a theme, or one of the themes at the very beginning, was this day of thanks. And so I just spent a lot of time as I was walking, just looking around and noticing what was there for me, what had been provided for me, and just giving thanks to God for all of those things. It was just amazing as you're walking the Camino. There are all of these paths. Some of them people have put crushed gravel or granite, all over the road. But in many places, there are these old ancient stones and paths that people have come along to make, just to make sure you know where to go and how to get to the next place where you're going. And it's really quite amazing. And then along the way, there are all these little towns, and in every town, pretty much there's a church, and it's a pilgrim's church. And often they would have a pilgrim's Eucharist, and so that was a beautiful thing. Just walking in Spain and God's creation was absolutely stunning. And all the birds and the sun and watching the sunrises was incredible. And then there were clouds that were coming at the right time, and water stations, and people sometimes put out snacks. And one of my favorite times, there were kids that had an ice chest in it. They had like pop ice and things like that towards the end of your day when it was really hot. And I absolutely loved all those things. And there were just so many things to give thanks for, beyond just the walk, but to think about this church, to think about my family, to think about all the blessings that I had been given in my life. And when you have many, many hours to do that, those things just come bubbling up. And it was a great spiritual exercise. Another day, one of the things that or many other days, I concentrated on receiving. And part of this was a view that as a priest, often we're giving of our time, giving wisdom, giving teaching, whatever it is that we're doing. And not very often are we recipients. And so one of the things I really enjoyed doing is seeing what are the things that are around me that I would receive. One of the coolest things that they teach you about if you read books and things like that, but it's this place here, and outside this place called Irache, there is a fount, and it's really free wine. And on the left side, it's red wine. On the right side, it's white wine. I don't like white wine at all, so I did try the red wine. It's not super fancy wine, but it's nice wine. It's kind of a neat little experience to go in there, and they tell you get a cup and take, and fact, they put a sign, and this says peregrino, which is like pilgrim. Si quieres llegar a Santiago. So if you want to arrive at the end at the cathedral in Santiago, it says, with strength and vitality, from this great wine, it says, choose like a cup and be blessed with happiness or with celebration. And it's called the fount, and it's a fount of wine. And these are just one of the things that you got to receive along the way. There were beautiful places where there were springs and rivers, beautiful mountains that you got to see, and scenery. And often you just receive from other people who greeted you and asked you how you're doing and were interested in your life. And so through the course of the Camino, there was a lot to receive. I really loved receiving the Eucharist most evenings when you'd go to the pilgrims worship, and it would all be in Spanish, and yet it didn't really matter. There would be people from all over the world gathered at these and celebrating the same Lord from around the world, and you receive that, and it was just a beautiful blessing as you went through this journey. One day I was walking along, and there's this beautiful lake. It's a man-made lake, but it's nice. You don't encounter many lakes on it. And as I walked around the dam part of the lake, I came around and there were some nice concrete benches, and I needed to sit down. I'd been having some trouble with some blisters, even though I walked anywhere from 5 to 12 miles, almost a day in Costa Rica. And in preparation for this, I still was getting, on occasion, some blisters. And one of the things that they encourage you to do is stop and let your feet dry. And so I stopped at this bench, and it wasn't 30 seconds, and this little red squirrel jumped up on the picnic table, and I took a picture of him, and he's literally, I'm right here, he's not far, and next thing I know, he's climbing on my phone, he's climbing on my hand, he's just looking around, and I just enjoyed this little guy. I was thinking to myself, I really want to take him home. And so I texted Sue a picture and said, hey, I think I want a pet squirrel. And Sue said, that's a hard no. We're not getting us a pet squirrel. We don't need pets. We got enough to take care of. But it was really cool. And there was another time I finished, and his squirrel was playing with another one. And I squatted down just to tie my shoes and things like that. And this little guy came right up and literally got up on my knee as I'm standing there. So someone's obviously fed and taken care of this little guy because he is extremely friendly. Anyway, it's just one of the things that doesn't happen all that often. Sometimes at Landa you might find that, but it was a lot of fun to experience. One of the scriptures that I said pretty much every day, and a lot of it came from the prayer book that I talked about last week that Shirley had given me, where I would pray through the day 4 times as we're called to in the prayer book. But it said in English, the prayer book's in English, but it said, put on the armor of light. It comes from Romans 13:12, and this just is saying to a group of people, pónganse la armadura de la luz, put on the armor of light. And in Paul's writings, he actually encourages us many times to actually imagine like it's clothing, like sort of like the white owl. I wear this black shirt most days and this white collar. On Sunday morning I do the same, but before the service I put on this owl, which is this armor of light. It really is, and that's what it's intended to be. And so I just imagine every day putting on this armor of light so that in the days of walking, in the days of my life, people might find in me the light of Christ that would shine into their darkness and reveal things or brighten up their day, whatever it might be. And so every morning I would say this again and again and again and just practice putting on this armor of light. And it was a beautiful thing to be thinking that I have this armor on, and was called to do that each and every day. As I began to do that, I would walk into towns, and one of the things, as I mentioned, is pretty much in every town there's a chapel or a church Some of them have cathedrals. They're unbelievable and really large and beautiful. But often you would see, and I took a bunch of these pictures of their spire, their steeple, or their bell tower, because often what you would see, you would be able to see as you're walking up to this town, especially if you were up on a hill looking down or flat, you would see that there would be buildings, but above the buildings and everything in it, this is the tallest piece of the town. And it just reminded me that we are a light on a hill, and we are this light. And I even think, even here at St. John's, we're sitting up on this hill. It's quite hilly on this place. If you ever walk from the lower lot up to the sanctuary, you can testify, yes, it sits on a hill. And it just reminded me, not only are we to be the light of the world, but I really got to thinking about St. John's in particular. And the thing that struck me is I really find this place to be perhaps a little different and unique in this community, in that we strive to welcome and love all people, irregardless of their situation, life, whoever they may be. And not everybody is like that. And I think that's a great light that should be shined into this community and everything we do, that says God loves you and the Lord has given his life and raised and died. Lived, died, and was raised for you. And it's just something that I really do believe as we continue as a church to be thinking in our everyday lives, whether it's us as an organization, whether it's your clergy, whether it's your staff, or whether it's your parishioners, that everywhere you go, everywhere we go, we should put on that armor of light and go into the world and be the light of Christ to the world. And that just really stuck with me, something that went through my mind and my heart a lot in this. And in fact, one of the things that I did is I took this piece of scripture, which is from Matthew 5, 14 through 15, and it says, Ustedes son la luz del mundo. So it says literally, you are the light of the world. And it says, una ciudad situada en lo alto de un monte no puede ocultarse, which means a city sitting high on a mount or a hill cannot be hidden. You can't hide it. In fact, you don't light like a candle or a lamp and to put it under a box or put it in a drawer. Instead, you put it on the lampstand, el candelero, so that it lights up all that are in the house, is what that's saying. So that, sino sobre el candelero para que alumbre a todos los que están en la casa. And so this is Jesus's call. This is in the Sermon on the Mount, and it's something that we are called to do. And I think we do it, but it's just to keep it in our mind's eye. And how can we do that even more in the life that we live in this church and in this community? Along the way, I took some different things, videos that I downloaded, and some books that I downloaded, and even some music to listen to. But what I found is I really didn't put the earplugs in very often and listen to much. One of the few things that I did decide was worth breaking the silence that I was living in to listen to was this book by Henry Nouwen. I've always loved Henry Nouwen. I chose this book. It's called The Way of the Heart, and its subtitle is Connecting with God Through Prayer, Wisdom, and Silence. And to be honest with you, the book was written for him as a Roman Catholic clergy for other clergy. It wasn't really written for laity, but it was written for us as clergy. And that's one of the reasons I chose, and I really like this book. And it was written in the early 80s, maybe 81. And what I loved with what he said in here, and this is phenomenal to me. So he's saying in the early 80s that we have too many words around us. And he mentions like television or cable that's going on in our world a lot. He's mentioning advertisements that are around the city. And he even says, I feel like I'm living in a dictionary. There's so many words just passing by me. And in the midst of that, he says words lose their meaning. And what he means is we don't really spend time on words. We don't spend time meditating on what they might mean. And especially, he says, the main word that we should be listening to is the Word of God, and really meditating on that word the most. And one of the things that he says to us is we can do that as we do through prayer and the wisdom of the scriptures, and then the silence that we create in our lives. And I have to be honest with you, I have no idea what he would think of our world today, where silence is, for the most part, gone. I mean, there's always noise around us, whether it's TV, whether it's the phone that we're staring at and looking at all the time. We've lost this gift of silence that God has given us, and reminds me of the uh, First Kings 19:11, where Elijah's run and he's come up to the mountain, and on the mountain God meets him, and there's a fire and an earthquake and uh, a wind, a great wind, and God's not in any of those most powerful things. But then it says, then there's the sound of either sheer silence or a still small voice. It just depends on which interpretation, which version of the Bible you listen to. But it is a beautiful thing. And if I were to take away one piece from the 11 days that I walked, it's that most of us, perhaps none of us, have enough silence in our lives. And we have to build it in. We got to build in this opportunity to, whether it's to sit in our house, perhaps in a chair, put the phone, radio, TV all off, put it in such a way, and literally just sit in silence. And 30 minutes or an hour is not too much silence, because it's in those moments, and he makes this point, it's in those moments that God really begins to speak to you. It's in those moments that the things that are within us start to bubble up and come to the surface. It's in those moments where we really start to be aware of all that we are working on, dealing with in our life. And so often we just cover it with noise. And those things go unprocessed, they go unaddressed, they are not worked on, and we're not able to do the hard work that we need to do to get to a place of abundance and fullness of life and health and salvation. And so I really enjoyed listening. I ended up listening to the book perhaps 2 or 3 times. It wasn't that long to listen to, but it was a really, really good book. And in fact, it's so good that I have Father Matthew and Reverend Riva. We're going to do the book in the course of this fall together. We're going to read that and kind of pull the pieces out that really speak to us. And so if you so choose, even though it's written for clergy, I think it'd be a great book for you. But I encourage you to be thinking about what are the ways that you can do silence. One of the ways I will tell you lastly that I'm practicing that is I will get up and walking most mornings, still trying to walk 5 miles most every day. I usually take at least 1 or 2 days of rest, but at least 5 days a week I'm walking. And I try to walk outside. I try to walk on streets in our community where there's not a lot of traffic, and just work on and pay attention to the things that are bubbling up in my life. What are the emotions, and what are the stressors, and what are the joys that sometimes I'm not even really intent on focusing on, because there's so much noise and busyness around me all the time. And so I can't again stress to you enough. Create and figure out intentionally ways to create days of time in a week where you can be silent and listen to that still small voice that's working on the things in you. In the course of walking, and just visited with one of the young men that I met. I'll show you a picture of him here in a little bit. Luke is his name. You get up early, and part of the reason you get up early on the Camino is it gets warm towards the end of the day, but if you get up pretty close to just as the sun is before it's risen or is coming up, you get a good start. There are not as many people. It tends to be quite cool. One morning I got up, it was 58 degrees there, and it was probably or late June. Can you imagine 58 degrees? It's like November weather after a cold front here. And here I'm in June experiencing that, but most mornings were 60, 62, 63 degrees. And so it was really quite cool and comfortable in the morning, and you're walking and generating, heat. And so it was really, really nice. In the course of that, unlike living here in the city, it was quite easy to catch the sunrise. And you got to the point where you really wanted to catch the sunrise. Like, oh my gosh, it's such this beautiful moment when you can actually see the sun just break into the day. It was so beautiful. And Luke, who it took him almost 40 days, 35 days to walk the whole thing, was like, after a while, Ripp, that was one of my goals every day, was to catch the sunrise. And many other people were like him, including myself. As we were talking one day, and I really don't know who it was. I even asked Luke if it was him the other day, and he's like, no, it wasn't me. But the idea was not that, as you see here, not that it's the S-U-N rise, but it's the S-O-N rise, the Jesus sunrise, right? And this person said to me, which I really took with me, I thought it was beautiful, is that each day brings this whole new possibilities of life and gifts and things like that. And it reminded them of the resurrection, right? So the sun rose from the dead, and in that we have this new life each and every day, and we're given the gift of new life and eternal life. And so we began to have this conversation about how just the sunrise itself is a reminder of the S-O-N rise, the rise of Jesus from the dead, and that gift that we get. We get life if we get up every day. We get blessings if we get out and are able to get out and experience the fullness of the world. And so it's one of the things that I've tried to do here, getting up at 5 in the morning, but not always able to see it because of homes or trees or hills or things like that. But it's a beautiful thing if you ever get to go to a retreat or something like that and you have the opportunity, do make the sun rise part of your day. And even if you can't, just if you're up early enough, go out the front door, see where it is, look, and just be reminded, new life has come to me today because of the S-U-N, but more importantly, the S-O-N. I really love that in that little piece of information. Here's a picture that I had where I would do it, where you can kind of see. I must have taken 15 pictures this morning, just trying to catch the sun just at its very first peak over and through these mountains, and I just love that. I just thought it was great. So, all right, as you walk, you get to a place, and this saint, Santo Domingo de la Calzada, which is de la Calzada is like of the road. That's all that means. And there's this great legend. These two roosters are part of the legend. And in fact, in I don't even remember what city it was. It might have been Burgos, but I don't quite remember. There's a cathedral built there, and inside the cathedral are two live chickens. They're kind of up in this box, kind of a way where anybody could tap on the glass or anything. But they're a reminder of the legend that goes with Santo Domingo. The legend's kind of interesting. It's kind of a legend. It's not that important to me. What was important to me is the life of this man. And one of the things that Santo Domingo or Domingo wanted to do, he wanted to be a Roman Catholic priest. And so he went through the process, but he was rejected. He was not allowed to be a priest. But he had this deep sense of call to care for God's people. And so you go through these series of towns, and you end up in that one town with the cathedral with the chickens and stuff. But they make mention of him continually. whether it was his birthplace or places where he built hospitals and things like that. And he became this saint, not because he was ordained like I'm ordained. Became a saint because he was ordained to do ministry for people. And the incredible way he loved and took care of people rose him to this place of fame along the Camino. And it's just a reminder to us. There's so many things that we think are important, careers and all these things, but at the end of the day, the people who are remembered, the people who are celebrated, are the ones who often are the ones who take care of their neighbors. They take care of the people around them. They love them, help them, show up for them. And it's true with us. Those of us in our lives, we have friends. We know the friends. If you're in a serious situation, who are you going to call that you know will show up with you? They're like Santo Domingo, right? Those are those people, and so it's just a reminder for us to know who our saints are, Santo Domingos are, or to be Santo Domingo. And I just love that. I love that part of the journey. You continually hear about him. You hear about him in the Eucharist. You hear about him in all the statues and plaques and things that are put around. And so I just love it. A man of the road, and he took care of those who walk the road, and it was a beautiful thing. I mentioned to you a minute ago that, that silence and being still and listening to that small voice was something that was impressed upon me. And I was getting towards the end. This might have been the second to last day, and I was walking actually through a cattle farm and our cattle ranch that had cattle guards and things. And I was really missing home, and really actually being in this place where there are cattle around just reminded me here of Texas, and it really felt a little bit like home. And I'm walking on the path, and I noticed this massive. This is really a large, beautiful oak tree. And it's not anywhere near the path. Like you would have to walk 100 yards off the path to get to this. And as I would do is I would be walking along, and then I would see something and it would strike me where it drew my attention, and I would start thinking about it. And then often I would go, I need to take a picture of this. This is like stirring in me. So I would walk back. So I walked back a little bit, and I got this picture of it, and I loved it because it's this beautiful tree. It's pretty close to the end of the day, and there's this single bench sitting underneath the tree. And even though I didn't do it, it was this reminder of these calls that I had been experiencing, and I did do it in some places. I just didn't do it in this time. But it was to slow down and to sit and to find a place of quiet and rest in those places in the presence of God. And this just reminded me of that. It was just beautiful, and just something that continually showed up in my days there, and something that I'm striving to do in my days here now. A little over a week later, I've come home, and then Sue and I have flown to North Carolina. And in North Carolina, we were doing this soul care intensive. And as I tried to do every morning, I would get up early and I would go walk, and trying to do at least my 5 miles. And I found this place called College Walk is the name of it. And it's actually a retirement center, very similar to like Eden Hill up here in New Braunfels, and had cottages and different levels of care for the people there who needed it in the city of Brevard that we were in. And one day I'm walking along, it's pretty early and walking, and all of a sudden I see they have this sign in there. I don't know if you can read it through the camera, but it says, "Slow down." And a little while later, maybe 200 feet or yards later, it had another one, and it said, "Now go slower." And it was traffic signs, but it was like, again, I took pictures because it spoke to me, like, slow down. And in fact, in that College Walk in there, they had 2 areas where they had put some benches along my walk. And so when I did those, I would get to those benches. I would sit down, even though I was in the middle of a walk, and I would be still, and I would give God thanks for the day and maybe say a prayer. and put on the armor of light if I hadn't already. And then I would just repeat a little phrase that our spiritual director had given us. And it was the words of God to Jesus in his baptism. You are my beloved, and in you I am well pleased. And so I would just sit there and I would imagine sitting next to Jesus often, his arm would be around me and just saying to me, Rip, you are my beloved, and in you I am well pleased. And that's a beautiful practice, a beautiful thing to do. If you are in the process of thinking, as I mentioned earlier, about a place to do silence, or maybe you already have one, I would really encourage you to add those words that God said to Jesus in his baptism before he had ever done anything. He was not famous. He was not known. He was a little man from Nazareth. Nobody knew who he was. He is baptized by his cousin John. And in the midst of that, we have this beautiful Trinitarian thing where God is speaking, Jesus is present, and the dove is coming, or the Spirit is coming down in a dove, and those powerful words that were meant for his son. But I do believe those words weren't just meant for Jesus. Those words are meant for all of us whom he saved, right? Who he lived, was buried, and died and buried, and then rose again for. And so if you're able in your life, say those words. And if you're like me, I really struggled to say them and believe them. I can preach them to you every day. I believe it about you. Believing it about myself is a little bit harder for me. It sounds contradictory, but I'm in the process of trying to work through that. Lastly, I wanted to show you, these are two of my friends that I've made on the trip. They're younger. This is Céline. Céline is from France. She's in her mid-30s. Really, really great lady. The first time I met her, she was walking and she kind of pulled up next to me and we were talking for a minute. And I was like, well, you seem like you're in a hurry. Where are you headed? And she's like, I'm trying to make it to the noonday mass in this little town ahead of us. And I was like, well, you're going to have to hurry. And sure enough, she just took off. And so we didn't get to visit very much, but I kept running into her. And then towards the end, the third or second to last day, she had become friends with Jarl. And actually his name begins with a J, not a Y, but it's pronounced with a Y, Jarl. And he is from Denmark, and he's in his early 30s, and they were just great people, nice, kind. Really, they had a light about them, and just enjoyed some conversations with them. Well, when I got to my last town in Burgos, on the way that morning, one of the few people I actually ran into on that last day was Céline. And she was wearing not tennis shoes, but she's wearing socks with sandals. And I said, what's going on? And she goes, Rip, I have these massive blisters on the back of my heels, and it's just hard to walk. And she said, I've got to go to the doctor, to the hospital today to get them treated if I'm going to finish it. And so I said, man, I'll pray for you. I hope that goes well, and maybe we'll see you tonight in Burgos at the Eucharist or something. And she said, sounds good. And then we walked together a while. And then even with these massive blisters, she was walking way faster than me. I was trying to go slow and slow down even more. And so I said to her, Céline, I'm going to take it a little slower. We'll see you this evening. And so she took off. Well, when I get to town, often I would go to a cathedral. And so I went to the cathedral, and as I was walking up to go into it, I saw Jarl. Hey, Jarl. Hey, Rip. And we're talking and visiting. And he's like, hey, man, I love visiting with you. Let's share contacts. And so we're sharing contacts. We spent about 15 or 20 minutes just chatting about our walk. And then I said, hey, how did the doctor go for Céline? And he said, well, she forgot her Euro medical card. And so it's going to cost her more than 200 euros to go even see the doctor, much less any treatment. And to be honest with you, she just doesn't quite have the money to be able to do it. And so I said, man, that's terrible. And I said, well, I'm going to go into the chapel here. I'd like to go pray, and maybe I'll talk to you about it a little bit later or something. So I go up, and it's kind of a winding cathedral. And by the time you get to the place where you can pray, it's as if the Lord said to me, Rip, St. John's has a discretionary, it has an opportunity to help someone. You're not able to finish this, but what if St. John's is able to help Celine finish the Camino by helping her to the doctor? So I messaged Jarl, and I said, hey, get Celine, let's see if we can help her. And he's like, I'm not sure she'll be open to that. And I said, well, I'm going to do some prayers. Can I meet y'all afterwards? And he said, yeah. So in the midst of my prayers, he texted me and said, she's not real comfortable with it, but come out after you finish praying. Let's eat lunch together. So we go and we eat lunch. And a little while later, Celine shows up, and it was great. It was like Jarl was sitting here, I was sitting here, she's sitting here, and then some of their other young friends that they all congregate with were all there. And one guy's from France, and another guy's from Poland, and it's like they're all from different parts of Europe. It was pretty cool. And anyway, so I finally convinced her, hey, the church would love to help you do this. And so in her sandals, socks, and blistered feet, we walked almost a mile to get to the emergency room. And on the way, Jarl and I start talking, and turns out this kid he's just, you can see him, he's just a bright light. He tells me his life story, which I hadn't gotten to hear yet, and how he's the one of 4 children to his parents. They had an older child. They wanted another child. They were Roman Catholic, and even though Roman Catholic, the mom, even though I don't think it's permitted, is the way he made it sound, she went and got some medication, and instead of having just one more child, she got pregnant with 3. And he said they really couldn't afford all 4 of us. They really just could afford one more child. And he said what happened was, I have one of my triplets. There's a sister that's a little bit older, and she was a great kid. The boy for them, was very difficult. And then the third one that was born was sickly and ended up dying at about 2 or 3 years of age. And he said, I was very, very hard for them. And at some point, maybe in middle school or so, he said they literally put me in foster care. They gave me away. And he said, I spent most of my life, my childhood, in that foster care system, and then graduated from it, and had a bunch of some good, some bad experiences. And he said, then he went on to say, I've tried to make amends and go back and, say to my parents, I don't hold anything against you. I just love you and everything. And my dad will text me every once in a while, but my mom won't have anything to do with me. And it was brutal to hear this story. And so Lynn's listened to it, and then we get to the emergency room, and we're waiting, and he's talking, and he's crying, and I share a little bit about my history with my dad and some of that stuff, and then we're able to pay $200, and it's probably $25-$30 for Celine to get in, and she got in and got back and treated, and they helped fix her up and everything, and then I said goodbye to him, and this is our picture where we're just kind of celebrating this opportunity to be together and things. And then a day or two later, Celine texts me. I'd given her my contact. She got mine. And she's like, hey, Ripp, I would like to talk to you as well, like you did Jarl, because I got a lot of mess in my family too. And so twice from there, she messaged me and just told me about how difficult her life and family is. She got a lot of sisters, but her dad just has never been around, sort of like my dad. And then she's in her mid-30s, and she's not married, and she's stressed about it. And one of the coolest things she said is, will you pray for me for a husband? And so every day when I get up, do my devotions, I pray for my friends. I had quite a few on the Camino, and I pray for them. And then the coolest thing is Jarl finishes, and if you could see, you can't, but if you could see, I'm in the picture. I'm back here in New Braunfels. Jarl is at the cathedral in Santiago, and he's finished, and he's bawling. I mean, he just is so emotional being on this thing. And then you can see in that other picture, Celine, she's celebrating that she finished. And so the cool thing is St. John's helped her finish. I just thought that was beautiful. Here are a couple other friends. Luke, I told you about him. He's from Chicago area, and that's his picture when he finished. And then I met a neat lady from Melbourne, Australia. She had a really difficult life as well, and we talked quite a bit, and that's her picture finishing there as well. I've since talked to him. I've messaged the others. Celine and I talked one time. Don't hear too much from Carolina, but it was really beautiful being there. And meeting them and walking a little bit with them. So as you know, I advertised that Sue and I were going to a soul care intensive. A friend of mine had gone to it. He's the one that recommended we go. For him, it was really good for his marriage, and he kind of tabbed it as a marital kind of retreat, and so that's what I thought it was going to be. Turns out for us, it really wasn't that marital. It was really figuring out where we are in our soul and what's going on our interior. And as a priest, a lot goes on in me that's unaddressed. And it turned out that probably 70 to 80% of the work was done directly to me. And on occasion, Sue would join in, which she wasn't upset about in any way, shape, or form. But that's the way this whole care intensive went. The priest needed a lot more work than the priest's wife. So a couple of themes that were really, really amazing to me in this and that we talked about is that Jesus said in him, he said the enemy in John 10:10 comes to steal, kill, and destroy. But he says, I've come to give you life and life in abundance. And so that was one of the questions, am I living in a life of abundance? And you may or may not know this, but in the spring before I went on this, I went to see the doctor quite a bit because my energy was really, really low. I was having a hard time getting going and doing things, exercising, and it had been going on for quite a few months since the fall. And I did all of these blood tests and all kinds of tests, and they literally could find nothing wrong in any of my levels. And it turns out, if I had to say, it was the state of my soul. It wasn't a medical issue. It was a soul issue, which includes medical, but it's so much more. It's all of your mental, emotional, relational, spiritual. It's all these pieces that make up the totality of who I am. And a bunch of those things were out of balance, and as such, I was not in very good place. In fact, he used that where Jesus says, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. And he said, Ripp, are you finding the yoke easy, or what is that yoke like? And I was like, it's been anything but easy the last couple of years for me. And so we focused a lot on that. He used a term called greening, which is coined by Hildegard of Bingen. She lived in 1098 to 1179. And she termed this, and it's the process by which we get to a life that flourishes, that has vitality, well-being, and emotional health. And so one of the key pieces of greening is pruning. You got to cut things that are not giving you life, that suck life out of you, vampire-ish, and you have to prune those things so that you can get to this place of greening. It was beautiful. I got to see this in real life as I walked through many, just hundreds of vineyards on the walk. And I loved how I have this picture that I didn't put in here, but in this picture, you're walking through this part of rows and rows, and then you can just look down this way, and there are rows and rows of grapevines. And they're scraggly. You can look down, the rows aren't very neat. And then some guy was coming through there with a tractor that had this machine, and on the machine it had these sort of like hedge clippers, but they were huge, and they were attached to a tractor, and he would just drive down the middle of the sort of this lane between these vines and these vines, and it would literally cut. And so I have this picture on my phone where it's scraggly in this row. The very next row is the tractor, and you can have a picture of it cutting. And then the third row, it's just clean, and you can see that they pruned all of these branches so that the vine and the fruit, the grapes, would just flourish and become bigger and richer. And it just really spoke to me in that process. One of the things that he said is that your role as a priest is impacting your soul. So I'm giving too much to the role and not enough time and energy to my own soul. And so we did this thing, it was beautiful, where he did this whole sort of get you to do a daily, an examination of your life and in your physical piece, your relational, spiritual, your job, and your emotional. And he had this little wheel and you would go through and you kind of said, what are the words? He put all these words with these things that are associated with how you've been feeling in these parts of your life. And a lot of them, for me, had positivities, but a lot of them had stuff that was a struggle as well. And so that became part of what we worked on. Another piece that he kind of associated with all of these things about the church being too large is right-sizing the church in my life. And he just kind of said, it has become too big. And he said, I don't say that to you because I'm an outsider. He was a Baptist minister and ended up leaving the ministry because he said the church was too big and my soul was suffering and I couldn't figure out how to do it. And so now I'm in this ministry where I try to help people and clergy right size whatever it is that has become too big in their life. I love it was a few days in, maybe 4 or maybe the last day, I can't remember, but he and I talked about with Sue. I would say Sue sort of gets a sabbatical every summer, right? So she gets 2 months where she doesn't have to go to the school and work for the most part. Some of that gets interrupted, but for the most part, she gets 2 months off every summer. And sometimes I have said to Sue, I like summer Sue more than I like school Sue, to which my wife, who's very quick-witted and always has a quick comeback, says, well, I like sabbatical Ripp more than I like, priest Ripp, And so he took off on that and used that and heard that. And he just kind of said, your challenge, Ripp, is how can I continue as sabbatical Ripp? How do you do the things that you've done in your sabbatical that have given you life and incorporate them on a daily, weekly, monthly basis in your life back home? What were the times of rest that you needed? What were the silence that fed you? Were you able to read and do some things like that? I find that I love being a part of people's lives here, but meetings and some of the administration and things like that, it doesn't feed me. As a rector, I got to do it, and I'm going to do it well, but it doesn't feed me. So I have to take breaks when I need, and I've over administrated and figure out times to get into a place of Sabbath and sabbatical. And so time to recover, exercise, taking regular vacations throughout the year, not just in the summer, which would include a quarterly break, and then trying to take a good piece of summer, at least 2 weeks minimum 2 weeks. And then the question again is, how do I serve as the rector of St. John's and become a smaller church, right size? And so that's something I'm working on. I mentioned earlier this beloved immersion. Again, you are my beloved, and in you I'm well pleased. It's something that I'm saying every day to myself to try to get to a place where I believe that in such a way that I can love my neighbor as I love myself, working on that. And then in soul care, he asked us to kind of work on some things. I love these questions. I don't ask these things of myself enough. I tend to give myself away. So what does my soul need today? What are the things I can do that would make me come alive? What is the abundant life that God wants for me? What does Jesus hope for me? That's a great one. And what is my Sabbath going to look like this week? So every week I got to take time to have a Sabbath time and do something that rejuvenates me, not just sitting doing rest or nothing. So the last thing, and I really want to encourage you, if you're interested, email me, but it's something that's called the Daily Exam, and it comes from St. Ignatius. It's a really simple thing that anybody can do by themselves, or they can do as a couple, or they can do with children. But you just kind of take a minute to sit in God's presence. So we do a little candle. The other piece about this that Sue and I love is there's no crosstalk. So you can't talk while someone else is talking. You can't even ask questions if you want clarifying questions. You got to wait till they finish so that they're not interrupted. I love it. But you become aware of God's presence. You take that. Then you just list the things that you're grateful for the day. The things, as Ignatius says, that give you consolation, or that we might say are the beautiful or the blessings in my day. The things that cause desolation, or they were just brutal for you that day, that took from you, that were hard to deal with, things like that. And then we do this one and then we switch. We do these two together and then we switch. And then the last thing is, there's someone or something for which I should seek forgiveness today, which is good because it really gets you to think about, was I rude to someone today? Did I think poorly of someone today because they're irritating me or whatever? And so it gives us an opportunity to be aware of that. I can send that to you, but I can't tell you what a life-giving activity that is every evening. We tend to do it in the evening before we go to sleep, either in the living room or in our bedroom, and it's just a beautiful thing. Anyway, love the work that St. Ignatius does and calls us to, and hopefully I'll be teaching the church more about that in the years to come. But that's the last thing, daily examine. So thank you for watching, listening. Hopefully it wasn't too long. Hopefully you learned something about the sabbatical. And if you have any questions, don't hesitate to message me through the church. Thanks so much.